It's time to check in on the latest rankings as we are in draft week, just a couple of days away. How are boards falling, late risers and fallers as we get new information before the 2024 NFL draft coming at you right now.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at PD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Get those draft week questions in for our mailbag tomorrow. And I believe, Matt, we're going to be doing it live on YouTube as well. So you can jump in the Q&A as well and chat with us as we get ready the day before the NFL draft. Who knows? We might go live again on Thursday morning because we got 2 more pods after this one before the real thing happens. And then, of course, we'll come back Friday and break everything down from what I'm sure is going to be a wild Thursday night and a first round of the NFL draft. And we're going to utilize the OG Mel Kiper's rankings with the risers and fallers and how we feel about things and the way things are looking right now on Tuesday of draft week, just a few short days away from the real thing. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of P&W is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. All right, what's the first thing that jumps out to you, Matt, as you look at Mel Kiper's final NFL draft rankings the week of the NFL draft? Because there's some things that immediately jump out to me here.
Yeah, and this doesn't jump out at me. I mean, the top of his list is very chalky, as is everyone's, but I just wanted to throw this out there and make sure I kind of got it on record before we get to draft day, which is 2 days away, of course. But the more I look at Caleb Williams, the more impressed I am. You know, early in the process, I was kind of like, transcendent talent. Give me a break. You know, he's good. He's not the best quarterback prospect I've ever seen. He's about as good as any prospect I've ever seen, to be very honest with you. And frankly, if I were to tier the top quarterbacks, I would have Williams in his own tier, May in his own tier, and then probably Daniels and McCarthy in their own. I think May's clearly number 2, and I kind of feel like I'm out on a limb on that one a little bit. And I also think Neighbors versus Harrison is a real serious conversation. Neighbors is more explosive.
Oh, he is more explosive, but that's not the end-all be-all.
Right.
It pertains to the NFL wide receivers. Another very explosive wide receiver is high in these rankings that I want to get to momentarily, but we got to start with quarterbacks, and there's multiple things there. He does have Jaden Daniels 2 at quarterback and 2 overall after Caleb Williams, and it does feel like most people, betting favorites, everything, points to Jaden Daniels as the second quarterback after Caleb Williams. I do agree with you about Caleb Williams, too, because with Drake May, there's like maybe prospect fatigue. I don't know what you would call it.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't follow up his season as a redshirt. Well, he's a redshirt sophomore, right? Or is he true junior? I can't remember.
I can't remember. Yeah, he sat behind Howe, and then he played 2 years.
Yeah, he's had 2 full seasons, and his first was better than his second. But when you look at the weapons, and I mean, you got to think, okay,
tough go of it, man.
And this is the way I always look at it: is okay, Drake May, 2 years from now, if he was a redshirt senior and then got the opportunity to go play at LSU with 2 first-round wide receivers, how much better would he look?
Right. He should win the Heisman too.
Right. And the other thing is how important is, I think, the data kind of shows like one of the most important things to being a good NFL quarterback is playing a lot. And he hasn't played as much. And Jaden Daniels has. So it's almost like, well, I don't know. I can't project it because I haven't seen it. Other dude played great, was a Heisman winner. So let's go with the guy who's played a lot of football and is maybe closer to what he's going to be as a man and as a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I agree about Caleb Williams, though. Even hearing him speak more, because people talked about him like he's a weirdo. Is he enigmatic? He seems pretty mature. He beats to his own drum a little bit, but nothing's like shocking or weird or red flags to me at all. And the tape is great. So, yeah, he's pretty slam dunk there as the number 1 guy. I would feel more confident now than even when the draft process started, because I think there was some prospect fatigue with him because he didn't back up his prior season with quite as good of a season this year either. And I think May is getting dinged, whereas Williams isn't quite so much.
Yeah, and the thing with Williams was everyone's focus is on the highlights, the Mahomes kind of stuff, and great. But what makes Mahomes is being so good from the pocket and orchestrating plays as they're drawn up. And the more I watched Williams, the more impressed I was with that. I mean, his processing sometimes was too good for those around him. I mean, he's ready to throw the ball, and his guys aren't nowhere even where to be yet, and things like that. And he's super competitive. I'm super impressed. And I actually think it's kind of funny because I fell into this trap too, but it was a long time ago, and I know more now than I know then. They even have a conversation of Caleb versus Fields for the Bears is like laughable now.
Well, it was always kind of laughable, but it was plausible because at least they had the one guy. And then when you look back, it was like, well, of course, there's no way. And I think some Bears fans were delusional about it, and they liked their guy and they're rooting for their guy. And I totally understand that. And they thought we were insane for even insinuating that they would not trade the number one pick and go with Fields, that they would actually get rid of Fields and go with Caleb Williams, where we thought the opposite. It was like, well, there's only one decision to be made here. It has to be this, which is the direction the Bears are going.
I mean, Williams is such a better processor. But let's get into this list. I mean, that was a conversation for 3 months ago, really.
So the quarterbacks, the thing that really stands out even more than that is that 6 quarterbacks are in Mel Kiper's top 31. He has Bo Nix at 31, Michael Penix at 24. So top 25 for Michael Penix. And then he has Drake May 3rd and J.J. McCarthy 4th on his quarterbacks ranking.
I have a problem with that. I mean, I understand Mel's been doing this a super long time, and we all know quarterbacks have more value. And they almost should have their own list. I mean, like, should goalies be ranked against skaters in hockey? I mean, it's almost like 2 different sports, you know what I mean? So, You know what I'm saying? But like, I don't think those 6 are 31 of the best prospects in this draft. You know what I mean? Like, you can't tell me Bo Nix is better at what he does than Kool-Aid McKinstry or Adonai Mitchell, or I don't believe that Byron Murphy is a lesser product than Penix. I mean, like, that's a tough sell for me.
I agree 100% on that.
Yeah,
absolutely. Looking at, and Mel's plugged in and calls a lot of people. You know, he famously doesn't even use his cell phone. His wife texts for him, and he's on landlines all day trying to talk to people, and he's plugged in. He's been doing this for 40 years, and he's got a lot of connections around the league. So I wonder how much of this is his own rankings and how much of this is what he's hearing. So is he hearing from executives around the league that, Michael Penix and Bo Nix are first-round quarterbacks? And then it leads to, we've talked enough about quarterbacks. I think it leads me to the biggest shocker, I think, in his top 25, which is Xavier Worthy comes in at number 18. And we've kind of hinted on the podcast, and I was like, man, this dude ran 4.21. He's not going to be there at pick 55 like he's showing up in some mock drafts. He's going to go earlier than people expect. He might be the 4th wide receiver off the board in this class, and he might be the big shocker on draft day. We're like, wow, somebody took him at number, the Bears took him at number 9. Whoa.
I can kind of see it. I mean, like, the league is friendlier to lean, small, whatever you want to call them, prospects. I mean, look at Tank Dell, but I'm even talking about draft capital. Devontae Smith, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison. They're all 175 at best. You know what I mean? I mean, they got up to that number for the combine, and everyone thinks they're 175, but they're all tiny.
I would ask you this, Matt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, but
no, all good.
How much better was Jalen Waddle as a prospect coming out than Xavier Worthy?
I think light years. And I like Worthy. I mean, I think I'm higher on Worthy than most because I'll never forget, after he ran those numbers, you presented all the guys that had awesome 40 times, and they all basically stink. You know what I mean? Like one good one.
Look at the best 40 times for wide receivers, and then look at the best 40 times for offensive tackles. And the tackles are good. The wide receivers are all bad.
They're all bad. But I do think Worthy, unlike a lot of those guys, is more Deshaun Jackson than he is, pure track guy, because I meant to have this conversation with you then, and it's a longer one than we have time for. But a track guy's only job is to move as fast as he can until the finish line. So a lot of those guys aren't good at stopping. Stopping's really important in the wide receiver, or downshifting at least. And Worthy can do that.
Yeah, he's a football player and not a track guy playing football. So I think that is important. He's so skinny. He was also, I think he got down weight to run as fast as possible and break that record. So, he'll play in the 170s, and who knows, maybe get him to 180, which is, basically peanut butter protein shakes all day for Xavier Worthy. The first day he steps into my building, because I'm like, okay, you're fast. We know it. We don't care about your 40 time anymore. We need you to be strong enough to play NFL football if we're going to draft you potentially in the first round. But 18 is really high. It's the highest I've seen him. So I had to throw that one out.
Steelers pick 20. So I've been throwing this out there too. And I'm kind of regurgitating what you've been saying for longer than me. I don't think Worthy's going to be there when the Steelers pick a 20. Not that they would take him necessarily. 20 is just kind of a cutoff for me. I think he goes in the top 20.
It's almost like a message to all the fan base. Don't be shocked if your team drafts Xavier Worthy in a spot where you don't expect it.
Like maybe the Bengals at 18. Okay, I get it.
And don't be surprised if he goes ahead of a lot of other wide receivers in this class, like AD Mitchell we'll get to next, seems to be on the fallers side. Other risers and fallers as we get close to the NFL draft, and what to take away from Kiper's latest rankings at ESPN next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. And prices on Game Time actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. So you want to download the Game Time app if you're thinking about going to a game, a concert, any comedy show, theater events near you, baseball, football, basketball, whatever it is. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat before you buy, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes all of the guesswork out of buying all tickets, including Major League Baseball tickets. And I've used Game Time mostly for baseball games, and I love it. It's the perfect complement for going to a ball game, because even if it's, even if you miss first pitch, it's okay. You can buy tickets even up to an hour after your event starts and get fantastic deals on last-minute tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So we teased AD Mitchell looking at the wide receiver rankings of this, and Mel's got him all the way down at 36, right?
30. And, yes.
And there was the anonymous scout stuff from earlier this week, and he might be
high maintenance.
Yeah, high maintenance. I think is one of the words that scouts used. Uncoachable was another. And there's the type 1 diabetes thing. And actually, one of our listeners pointed out, and I think this is a fantastic one, said, "What about AD Mitchell at 30 to the Baltimore Ravens? Because Mark Andrews has already been dealing with the type 1 diabetes, and obviously things are going fine for him in the NFL. What would that be an environment that's really good for AD Mitchell? And is it just because the others, the attitude and the all the other stuff kind of seems to tie in with his diabetes issue?
Yeah,
and
right.
If you can fix that, do you just get an all-pro wide receiver because he's a freak of nature on the field and has ball skills and he's got everything?"
So I'm pre-diabetic, and I mean, I know a lot of people that have diabetes, et cetera. And from what I understand, the little homework I've done on it, mine's extremely manageable. It's hardly even an issue at all. But sometimes you can feel your blood sugar really falling or whatever, and you just feel not like yourself at all. I mean, and I'm not doing anything resembling his job. You know what I mean? I'm sitting here talking to you,
right.
I can kind of understand to some degree. But to me, it's just like, will you manage it? Like if you that's why I think he wanted so many visits. Like, hey, we can help you. Will you let us help you? And if he's resistant to that, then we got problems. Or if you got to follow him around to make sure he takes his medicine. Like, I don't have that kind of time. So I think he's the most talented of this group. But what also stood out to me, kind of like what we're talking about, is there is 7 receivers on his list between 32 and 43. I mean, they are just scrunched in there together. And I think Mitchell's the best of the bunch, but I'm sure other teams are like, why don't I just take McConkey or Coleman or Leggett or Wilson or Corley? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And they're round two's kind of been the sweet spot for wide receivers recently anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So after the top three, could we see Worthy jump up and be wide receiver 4 and Brian Thomas Jr. And then all of a sudden there's Leggett and Keon Coleman and Mitchell and McConkey and Pearsall. And it's going to be like, GMs in a candy store to pick your flavor of wide receivers there. Malachi Corley's all the way up at 42 on Kiper's list here. Roman Wilson at 43. That's pretty amazing. It's going to be, it feels like a draft of runs where it's going to be all those offensive players, quarterbacks, wide receivers, and then all of a sudden there's going to be a run on defensive players, and then all of a sudden there's going to be a run on offensive linemen at the end of the first round, and then all of a sudden it's going to be those wide receivers in round 2, maybe a little mini quarter or a corner cover guy run. Kool-Aid 35 is pretty low. He seems to be someone that's sliding as well a little bit, Matt. Nate Wiggins is at 25, but the first corner on his board here is 20 with Quinyon Mitchell, and then right after him, Terrion Arnold. Can we go 20 picks without seeing a corner selected in the NFL draft?
Yeah, he's not predicting where they're going to go. That's what he does in his mock. He's just his ranks, but I don't see that either. I think Quinyon Mitchell most years is the second corner off the board. Usually there's somebody that's an easy number 1, Sauce, Stingley. I know they were the same year, Ramsey, on those two type of dudes. But I think Mitchell's almost always a top 20 first round grade type of player at a position that's hard to find. Another run I expect to happen, which won't be as exciting, but it's kind of fantasy related, is late 3rd round, early 4th. I could see like a million running backs going. And then one thing I want to throw out here too in this neighborhood is Byron Murphy at 27 and the other defensive tackle, Newton, at 40. I think we'll go much, much higher than that. I think that position's in more demand than this list might imply, which doesn't mean that and that's not exactly what he's doing. But if you're going to put quarterbacks in demand, I think the D tackles are in demand.
Yeah, and if you consider Darius Robinson someone that you might play more at tackle because he's a little bit of a hybrid edge, and I think he's more big end that moves inside occasionally and rushes from there potentially.
Mm-hmm.
But Byron Murphy and Johnny Newton, as he is sometimes known, I think have to go even higher than where most teams have him ranked because they're the only clear, this is a starting defensive tackle in the NFL. And there's some other good prospects, but apparently there's some questions about character stuff with Michael Hall, like immature guy, and he bailed on Ohio State. He wasn't even a starter, even though he's really explosive interior rusher. So many undersized guys, and then you have a 366-pound guy who might play at 390 pounds, and Tavondre Sweat. And so there's a lot of unknowns and not a lot of clean defensive tackle prospects. Even Chris Jenkins, who's probably tackle 3 at this point in this class, didn't have a ton of production, and
Roop's a bit of a project. And,
just kind of betting on traits there a little bit. And, he might not get to your spot again in late second round if you pass on defensive tackle in the first round. So that's why I think Johnny Newton and Murphy are going to go really high.
Yeah, and they impact the passing game. They're athletic upfield guys that in today's NFL are coveted, and they're hard to find.
I want to highlight centers for a minute because the interior offensive line class, we've talked a lot about tackles because there's so many first-round guys, but there's a ton of interior guys too. And some of them might start to go at the end of round 1 all the way through day 2 and even into day 3. There's just a million of them. So is that a reason why Jackson Powers-Johnson might fall down some rankings? And it seems to be that he's going in one direction while Graham Barton, who I would have thought since he's a college tackle who everyone projects inside would have slipped on draft boards, but Graham Barton seems to be going upward by just about every analyst. Jackson Powers-Johnson, for some reason, who I thought was the top interior offensive lineman in this class, or at least the top center in this class, and was locked into a first-round pick after the Senior Bowl, and the tape he's put out there, he seems to be sliding. Jackson Powers-Johnson out of Oregon's 57 on Kiper's list, while Graham Barton's 19.
And Frazier's 53. So, Powers-Johnson's down to 3rd on the center list. Yeah, I've been studying centers like crazy. And I think the beauty of Barton is, this is a knock on the other guys, but he has a pretty rare combination of size, intelligence, and especially athletic ability, along with versatility. Maybe he could play tackle in a pinch, get you out of a game. I'm not saying he's like a starting tackle, but anywhere on the interior, I think he has a very low bust percentage. Powers-Johnson, I hope this isn't true, but you keep hearing rumblings about concussion stuff, and he refused to take some cognitive test at the combine, which you wouldn't think is a big deal unless there's some sort of brain situation that we don't know about. And hey, I'm the first to do the same thing too, but I get so geared up to watch the Senior Bowl, and he kills guys for 3 days in a row there, didn't even finish. And all of a sudden you think he's, Dwight Stevenson,
Right.
like, Wilson from Michigan, Mitchell from Toledo were awesome at the Senior Bowl. Yeah, but that's only 3 days. You know what I mean? Like, let's just because we're all staring at it, let's not overreact to that stuff.
And he's a big center, maybe
He is.
too big, which seems weird to say, but he's shaped a certain way. Maybe just teams will start to feel safer about Zach Frazier, what they're getting, and bypass what I still think Jackson Powers-Johnson is the best center in the draft. And look, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Matt, but I have to imagine if Jackson Powers-Johnson's there for the Steelers in round 2, you'd be pretty happy about that, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, everyone's hoping Frazier's there at 51 for the Steelers in the second round. And a lot of people have even put Barton in the first round. Personally, I would not take a center in the first round in the top 20. But if he falls to 51, this town will go bonkers. One thing I wanted to throw at you earlier in this process that we haven't talked about a ton either, which applies to him and also the guy right behind him on this list, Sumataya from BYU, is they're two of the absolute youngest prospects in a draft that's just loaded with old guys. And they both seem to be falling. Could that hurt them in some way? Like when you do all these interviews, do they come across less mature because they're less mature and they're 3 years younger?
And the tape potentially too. I want to address that a little bit more because Suamatai is another interesting one who it's really difficult to figure out where he could go. And I think he's probably has the biggest delta of high versus low potential draft slots. So let's get into some of those questions next. The next segment of Peacock and Williamson is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you, and it's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life. And let me tell you, it is so important to not allow that small thing to become the big thing. So you got to let that out, and it always helps to have someone unbiased in your life, and that's where therapy comes in. And sometimes you just need that weekly check-in with a therapist. Make sure you're hitting the goals you want to hit every week in your life. And therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than whatever our favorite sports team or whatever it's going on in your life that can feel like it's a big thing, and it's really not. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And yeah, it's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Major League Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single one of those games. But how about those draft props? And it is draft season and draft week. You have a couple more days to get in those bets at FanDuel for the NFL draft. Go back to our earlier podcast this week where we broke down some of those draft props at FanDuel. Tons of fun ones. Some of the best way to make money during the betting season, in my opinion, is those draft props. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks to the NFL draft, all in an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Kingsley Suamataia is a fascinating one. I would throw a prospect like Roger Rosengarten in there, where I see him mocked at the end of round 1. I see him mocked in round 3 in mock drafts. And
I may throw Patrick Paul in there too, who frankly I don't think is very good.
So I actually like Patrick Paul. I was surprised. So here's another one. I see Guyton in the first round.
Yeah.
And I don't know why everyone's so excited about Guyton but doesn't like Paul. Because to me, they're back to back. And I would buy arguments that one is better than the other. Paul can really move well and actually tested better than Guyton for being, 6'7", 330 pounds or whatever he is. He's big. It's sometimes he almost looks a little too big. But to me, it's mostly hand placement. He's not going to be, a perfect fit for a lot of the outside zone stuff. You really want to get him out on the move a lot, even though he can move. He's not necessarily a finisher as well, but he can move great for his size, and he's got these crazy long arms. He just needs to get his hand punch inside a little bit instead of more bear huggy. He seems like a smart guy. I like Patrick Paul a lot, especially where I think he's going to go. If you can get him in the third round, I think he'd be a starting offensive tackle in the NFL. I wouldn't draft him in the first round. By the way, Patrick Paul himself, this is where the information stuff gets crazy. And I do feel bad for prospects because, whether it's the guy who's at the NFL draft and the camera's on him all night and he doesn't get taken in the first round, or any of these prospects, they get promised stuff. And Patrick Paul said recently, he had a quote and he said, man, those media draft boards are way too low on me. I got information that tells me someone's going to take me in the top 32 picks. You better watch out for me on Thursday night. I'm like, wow. First of all, don't be shocked because it could happen, right? I could see a team loving Patrick Paul. But on the other side, I think teams do that all the time. Oh, man, we love you. We're going to draft you, and then don't draft him. So
it's kind of like recruiting, I can send you letters. That doesn't mean I'm offering you, right?
I hope he's not getting duped on that, and he's sitting there on in the third round and super disappointed because the team told him he's going to take him in the top 32. Kansas City Chiefs top 32 because they like the bigger offensive linemen. I do like that area for like the Guytons or even Suamataia. But you asked the question about Suamataia, and he's a fascinating one to me because the tape is raw, but he was 20 years old the last time he was playing college football. He just turned 21, one of the youngest prospects, but he has all of the physical tools to be a starting tackle. He's got a full year at right tackle, a full year at left tackle. And I see Suamataia and I just see like, oh, this is exactly what you want. He's got strong hands, big, he's got long arms, he's got all the physical tools you want. He can get out and move. He fits multiple schemes. He just needs to get coached up a little bit because he's a redshirt sophomore. But, does he not come across as mature in interviews potentially because he's younger? Is his tape not as clean as other prospects because those guys, have more experience? So it's hard for me to say like, oh, man, Guyton's a first rounder, but Suamataia isn't. I just don't see that. In fact, I like the upside of Suamataia as much or more because of the way his body moves versus Guyton, who's just a little bit more upright on his 6'7" frame. But yeah, usually youth is a positive, but is it a negative for some of these prospects?
That's what I was wondering. I mean, just when we were having that conversation last segment, I kind of thought, are most years, you bring these prospects in for interviews and visits, etc. Most of them are, 21, 22 at the oldest. They're Powers-Johnson's age or Suamataia, I kill his name, Kingsley's age, and so you're judging them against the guy that comes in next and the one before him. But this year, the guy that comes in before him and the one after him is 3 years older. He's talking about, I got 2 kids and my 401k and, my minivan and, I bet they come across as immature for this class, which really isn't their fault. On the field and off, maybe. Technique and,
Yeah. Looking at a couple of names deeper down the list that maybe people might be shocked to hear. Maybe not our listeners, but maybe the casual fan that's tuning into the draft. And at number 70, Mel Kiper has Jalix Hunt.
That's an interesting one. Yeah.
A pass rusher, edge rusher, sort of a stand-up outside rusher from Houston Christian. And he's a great athlete. He's long. He's all legs and arms. Like he's just a pup. He looks so raw. I don't think he's going to be a fit for a lot of teams because he's not going to hold up on the edge. So you probably need to be one of those 3-4 type teams. But I don't like him as an off-ball backer either. So I kind of have an issue with him being this high, but what he could be, maybe you get him a year in an NFL weight room and he starts to look a little bit different. And, maybe he's your outside stand-up type of a pass rusher. But Jalix Hunt's an interesting one. And I haven't seen him as high as 70. He's mostly day 3 guy on every board. So Mel has him at 70. And then down the list here is a CFL corner.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Quantez Stiggers. He played for the Toronto Argonauts. Is that correct? And 127.
Defensive rookie of the year this past year for them.
Yeah. So he's still like he's normal, especially for some of these young or older prospects. An interesting path to getting to the NFL, but an interesting player, worked out really great, and someone to look out for maybe early day 3 where you're a little bit surprised. He's like, who is Quantez Stiggers? How come I've never heard of this guy? My team just drafted him like in the 4th round.
I don't think he ever played college football, and I don't know exactly what the rules are in terms of eligibility. Why aren't there a ton of CFL guys on here? I think it's because he never played college football, and now he's far enough away from high school or whatever. But a lot of people think he's a 5th-round pick, 4th-round pick. There's interesting tape to watch because he's playing at least against professionals in a different league. So that is a great name to know. I want to go back to Hunt real quickly. He was a safety at Cornell. So he's a supreme athlete for an edge guy, and he's super smart.
Yeah.
And he's smart, right? So you would think he could put those two things together. But I watched him, and I do see that there's round 3 buzz on him. He has no idea what he's doing. I mean, he's the best athlete on the field times 1,000 and just runs and tracks things down. But, I mean, he's going to take a while. I mean, he's a year away from being a year away to me.
Right. Yeah. And that's a tough sell on day 2 for me. If we're talking about a 6th, 7th round guy who can run down on special teams for a couple years and then you see what you got. But yeah, I wouldn't even know where to stick him on defense right now.
I think he's like a 3-4 edge guy, but he still has to deal with tackles, and that's a tough gig.
But he's got a long frame that, he could put on more weight. He might end up being a 265-pound pass rushing demon, right? Get him a locker next to TJ Watt for a couple years.
Exactly. I mean, that's what some teams thinking about. If he's smart and he's receptive to it and the best is ahead of him, great. But you probably don't hear from him all next year. And then 2026, he has 10 sacks. Like, I remember him, thought he was overdrafted.
Those are some of the highlights from Mel Kiper's final big board draft rankings for the 2024 NFL draft. It's going to be fascinating to see where all these guys go in just a couple of days. And we're going to go live on Wednesday, noon Eastern, with your questions. So hit us with those questions on Twitter at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Hit the notification bell so you know when we go live, and we can talk NFL draft on NFL Draft Eve Wednesday right here. Peacock and Williamson.